Oh, me?
No,
Okay,
Frank, true.
Again, Mike, thanks for putting these on. It's really special. I really appreciate it. But as Mike said, I'm Frank True. I'm head football coach at Montserrat. I've been coaching for about 20 years or so, or 22 years at all different levels. But I've been at Montserrat. I started there in 2006, 2005 as a defensive coordinator. And in 2011, I took over as head coach. I left for a few years and went to Hyde. So Coach Suki and Coach Radowski, I know what you guys go through up there, and I can really appreciate it. But I started back at Montserrat again this year, and hopefully for a long time now. So
Cool. Coach Barber, go ahead.
This past year, I was at Lee Academy in Marianna, Arkansas. Before that, I was in Louisiana, closer to home. I've been at that was my 2 years. The last 2 years, I've been 8-man. I've coached. This will be my 10th year coaching. Most 8 years of it has been 11-man. Coached 4 years at Dallas at Grapevine Faith Christian School as the offensive line and head junior high coach. Had a chance to win a state championship there. And then I spent next couple years at Dallas Christian School under Coach Wheeler, and I was the running backs coach and head JV coach. And then before that, I was at my high school, Calvary Baptist Academy, and I was the assistant offensive line coach and head junior high. So that's been kind of my journey.
Awesome, Coach. Coach Gallant.
This is finished my 20th year. Been over a few places. I was at Massabesic for a couple of years before coming. I took 2 years off, and then Coach Plant roped me back into coaching. Actually, my wife made me to get out of the house. I was at Deering for a long time before that, and that's pretty much everything.
Yeah, I'm gonna guess that Coach Plant roped you into it because what we were talking about before he got on here, he needed somebody to make life easier on him, right? That was it.
Yeah, he sold me on the no doubles and things like that. So I was like, I'm in.
Coach smarter, not harder.
Coach Shuki, go ahead.
Steve Shuki. I'm at Kent Hill School. It's a boarding school in Central Maine. Just finished our first year 8-man. It's my 7th year overall. Before that, I was at Bowdoin College in Maine for 7 years. And prior to that, 1 year coaching college in Pennsylvania. But yeah, it's been Maine now for 14 years and just trying to figure 8-man out after one.
Coach Rudolski.
Yep. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we got you, Coach.
Good. Well, you know my IT knowledge. Coach Shuki knows it very well. I wanted to make sure I hit that mute button. But Tom Radulski, head football coach at Hebron Academy. It's 3 years now. I'll be going into my 4th year. Obviously, this past season was our first year of 8-man football in learning. And Coach Hath, thank you. I know Frank said the same thing. The work you've done over the last month, putting all this together has been great. I know Skip Capone, same thing. You guys have been great in putting this all together. My background, longtime college coach prior to coming to Hebron Academy. Worked with Coach Shuki at Bowdoin. My other experience at Maine, I worked at Colby College back in the mid-'80s. Coach Hath mentioned Ken Lindloff. I slept on his couch for about 6 months while I worked at Colby and got my introduction to the state of Maine football. But a long college career prior to that. So I'm ready to go tonight. Excited about this coaches panel.
All right, Coach Plant, how about you?
Mine's pretty boring. I've been at Old Orchard Beach my entire career, playing and coaching. So I think this is my 27th coaching some form or fashion. Kind of worked my way up through the ranks. Took over the head coaching job in 2002. Been real fortunate to keep pretty similar staff members for most of my career. And about 4 years ago, I took over the AD piece as well. So I'm a homer.
There you go. We'll get right into it, fellas. I'm going to give you guys some questions where we'll kind of go around the horn and everybody will answer. And then there'll be a couple I'll just kind of throw it at, maybe one or two guys specifically, and we'll kind of move around that way to keep it flowing. But I want to give you all one to start is, most of the guys on here know, but some of you guys from out of state, we had 10 schools last year in 8-man. It was the first year that Maine has had 8-man football. We have 16 more schools that are going to transition to 8-man this year for a total of 26. So it's really, pretty new to us here in Maine, and these guys were all part of that, transition this year, and Coach Barber transitioned over a couple of years ago where he is. So my first question would be, what was the toughest part of that transition of going from 11-man to 8-man? So I'll start up there with Coach Drew.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. The toughest thing for me was coming back to Mount Ararat and not knowing any of the players. A bunch of new coaches that I had with me as well. Just trying to put in our offensive system and offensive and defensive schemes, if you will, and with the fewer less players. It was to develop the kid at the same time. We were trying to change what we were doing. Luckily, we got word early on in January, February that we were going to be going to 8-man, February, March, something like that. And I reached out to a few coaches out in Kansas, in Michigan, and got some film from them on how they started out, their first year, and then where they were at present time, and just to see how they developed. I kind of tried to mirror some of that, but it was tough on us. Our kids and their technique weren't, we had a lot of work to do that way, along with scheme. So it's hard to really put the finger on exactly what was the toughest, because the transition itself was from the whole thing of brand new, me coming to the school, not knowing any of the kids, and then switching over what I know on my comfort zone into from 11-man to 8-man. I guess if you wanted to put one finger on it, when we're not talking scheme or talking technique, the formations were a little bit different. Defensively, the coverages were a little bit different for us. We evolved from trying to play a cover 3, which wasn't really working for us, to trying to play more man or a cover 2 invert. But those were the challenges, trying to figure out not only our personnel and where to put them, but to change our scheme and to to what we were expecting on Friday or Saturday afternoon. I guess that's it in a nutshell.
Awesome. Coach DeMillo, welcome.
How's it going? Sorry I'm late.
No worries, man. Glad you could hop on. Coach DeMillo coaches at Maranacook. Played at Jay High School for my defensive coordinator, Coach Barnaby. Certainly one of the up and coming coaches in Maine. So he's going to hop on the panel. Coach, we're going around. I'll put you on the end of this one, but we're asking guys kind of what the toughest part of the transition was. So, Coach Barber, we'll go to you next on that one.
I think in a nutshell for me was, I think a couple of y'all were on here when I did the presentation about the offense, was defense for us. Going and down here, we have to cover the 100-yard by 52 field. It's a regular field for most people. And trying to cover 8 people in a whole field's really tough. And I think with that is open field tackling. And not in 11-man, you're able to rally a lot more to the ball, but 8-man, you're kind of one-on-one, and that's where if you have Jimmy's and Joe's come and play more often in 8-man, but teaching those, like Coach Frank was saying, technique, and finding the time to teach the technique as you're game planning and things like that. I think so. Defense in a nutshell was for us open till tackling.
Awesome. Coach Gallant, how about you?
Just speaking, I'm going to speak on the offensive side because that's what I do. At least now that we're at 8-man, we were pretty lucky in that we hooked up with Coach Steinbrock pretty early. We knew as a small school that this was the only way we were surviving, and we embraced it. Thanks to Dean. So offensively, scheme-wise, we had an idea what we wanted to do, but the biggest challenge for us was, being our first year in Maine, having so many unknowns. Not knowing, we don't have a library and we don't have any idea of what other schools are going to be doing. So how do you what you want to do offensively, but you don't know what you're going to see for defenses, for fronts. So that was a big challenge. And then figuring out how do we get our practice to where we want to be, taking what we were doing. We started out just taking our 11-man schedule for practice and our breakdown and just trying to do that. That didn't work. And we probably changed practice plans, I don't even know, at least twice a week to try to find something that worked for us and our kids and got us what we needed. So, that was the biggest challenge that I felt is just that unknown, all the unknowns.
Coach Shuki, how about you?
Yeah, I would kind of agree with Coach Barber. For me, it was defense. That may be more me personally, just because I felt more comfortable drawing up the X and O's offensively, and this is what I've done for forever. So, it was how are we going to run defense? I found an offense I liked really fast at Glacier Clinic in Kansas City, and kind of went with that. Defensively, though, I think my DC and I worked on the summer on a defensive front, and then after 2 days of practice, we're like, nope. So, we kind of went on the fly, and I gave it all to him, and he took it over. But, again, I kind of agree with Coach Gallant. The unknowns, like, the field's smaller, but until you run jet sweep in a game, you don't realize how much smaller it actually is. And your best kid runs out of bounds for 2 yards. So kind of dealing with that. And it's unknown to the officials, too, which is always fun. Dealing with that and learn using the first year as a learning experience was important for us.
Coach Podolsky, how about you?
Yeah, special teams were a little bit different. Again, no field goal extra points. I think in my previous clinic, I spoke about Holderness trying to kick an extra point unsuccessfully. And so in the special teams game, same thing, field goal extra points were eliminated. We didn't see it except for one scenario. And it makes sense. There aren't enough players to line up across to effectively block it. So 2-point plays were big. And same thing with kickoffs and kickoff returns. In our league, we saw a lot of squib kicks. So from a special team standpoint. In terms of offense and defense, I felt going in from an 11-man standpoint, if your philosophy was to power run or spread, if you were an odd front or an even front, I felt you could transition to those concepts in 8-man, which we did. But there's some tweaks as we went into it. It's like Coach Shuki said, defensively, you look at some things and there are some subtle differences that you had to look at. I know offensively, if you're playing without a tight end, and if you're running some gap schemes, if you're pulling, there's some little things you had to figure out that were different from 11-man. So, and again, practicing in our league, and we practice with small numbers. We can talk more about that, just adjusting to practicing with small numbers.
Awesome. Coach Plant?
Yeah, I guess I don't want to sound like a broken record, and these guys hit on most of the football pieces, and we kind of anticipated some football issues would arise and just challenges that I was pretty confident we could manage, and with the staff I have, for me it was a constant added pressure. I think where first season transitioning, we had sold everybody on it. We were kind of pushed out in the forefront, so it was kind of like a PR piece and the added pressure we put on ourselves to make sure that we put a good product out there. For me, that was kind of the biggest piece of the transition. The football stuff ends up being football. You know, when we were an 11-man team, we had issues blocking extra point too. So we just got creative and did different things. But yeah, I think these guys hit the nail on the head. You know, special teams, blocking certain formations, and figuring out formations that were successful. So I'm going to stick with it was all the other. That was a challenge for me.
Coach DeMillo, how about you?
So, I think, like Dean said, beating a dead horse here, but looking online and finding that there was just so much out there, and that, I'm horrible with names, but he just mentioned it. You could really kind of, if you were a power man and a power run and 11-man, or you were a spread, you could pretty easily transfer that over. Obviously, some tweaks. We didn't even really know what we wanted to be yet. Based on personnel, we kind of became a power run team. The tough part was definitely special teams. That took some maneuvering and figuring out and researching and stuff. But just a lot of time was spent scheming, and we ended up realizing a couple weeks in that some of the basics really needed to be hammered home, like open field tackling. And so spending a lot of time implementing the basics again, which you think your kids had, when in reality they didn't. So,
Dean, as a head coach, let's get into practice planning a little bit. How do you how is the practice planning maybe different than it was from, when you guys were an 11-man team? Coach Plant.
Oh, gotcha. I thought you said not hearing so well here. That was kind of one of the challenges. We thought that we got over that hurdle probably, what, John, week 3, week 4?
Yeah. By the time we got our offensive plan down, yeah.
Yeah. Defensively, again, the first part of the season was very challenging because teams like Coach DeMillo said, were still kind of figuring out who they were. So we'd scout a team and they'd come out in a completely different package the next week and run with that. So defensively, we kind of schemed and organized to make sure that we had something for everything. But in terms of practice structure, we tried to do similar to our 11-man schedule. Mondays were films, conditioning, weight room, and then we'd either do Tuesday, Wednesday, depending on if we were ready for offense. Tuesday, then we'd do a defensive and an offensive day, fully with individual on the other side of the ball. So we try to hit a little bit of both on Tuesday, Wednesday, and then Thursday is, nuts to soup, hit everything. Friday we play. So I think John can speak to how he liked to set up his offensive structure a little different. He did a great job.
Yeah, Coach Gallant, why don't you talk about that a little bit, just the way you set up your offensive stuff for the week?
Yeah, so we would like Coach said, Tuesday was usually a defensive day, and we do offensive individual. And we would do about 15 minutes of offensive individual. And that was mostly for our linemen, because we don't have, kids who are very skilled linemen. We have great players, great attitudes. But the individual skills were lacking, like some of the other guys have said. So we spent a lot of time with that. So while linemen were doing their blocking progression, we'd have all the skill kids. We started out the year breaking it down. Running backs and quarterbacks, you're on the bags doing your running drills. receivers are doing footwork drills. And, we had 3 receivers and 7 running backs. And so we pretty much just combine those two, and do a quick 5-minute, just running drills over bags. And then the receivers would go do stuff for 5 minutes while the backs, or I would take the receivers and the quarterbacks. We would do our three-step progression, and Coach Plant would take the running backs and do blocking, because that's a big part for our running backs, especially our 2 up backs. I know that Coach Blosser is a Kansas guy, so he understands our offense, and I sent him some of our film. Our up backs are pretty important in our blocking game, so they would spend a lot of time with that. And then, I came from, a coach who we went to spread and 11-man. We were running concepts in 2002, and in 2006 we went down and spent some time at UNH with Chip Kelly. So a lot of our concepts and our approach to practice came from them. And so everything's really fast paced. And we would do a 15-minute run period, 15 to 20 minutes. And I was looking at some scripts tonight before getting on, and I had at least 40 plays scripted out that we'd rip through. Every single run play. And for the guys that played us, I know it seems like it's only 2 plays at a time in a game, but we practice a lot of different plays. And then that first offensive day, we would do about a 15-minute team pass period where we just run through all of our passing concepts we wanted to focus on for that week. And then whatever day the next day, if that was a Tuesday, we would just do base run, for 20 minutes, 15 minutes, just to get it into the kids. And then Thursday is everything. Again, we're probably offensively if we had 40 minutes on a soup to nuts practice, we're ripping through 60 to 75 plays, different player groups, personnel groups, things like that. So we finally got it down to a pretty good point at the end of the year, especially when we had a lot of injuries. We got those kids back, those kids that understood and knew and were experienced. So it definitely helped us.
Coach Radulski, you guys have a pretty small roster over there at Hebron, around 15, 16 guys. Can you just talk a little bit about, how you manage that during the week, in terms of the way that you practice? Maybe how many of those guys go both ways during the game, and just some things that you have to keep in mind, both practice and game day with the small numbers.
Yes. Since I've come to Hebron, my first 2 years in 11-man, we were under 20, and with 8-man, we were about 15 players this past year. One thing I think you have to take into consideration is the time of practice with the amount of players. With 15 players, you're not going to practice a typical 2-hour practice. So I think that's important to look at. How many players do I have? And what can you expect out of them for a length of time? And for us, with 15 players, we're about an hour and a half that we thought was a good time to get the work done that was needed. So for us, typically, with that amount, Mondays were typical Monday practice, film review, running, kicking game, all those type of things. Tuesday, hour and a half practice, run and stretch, specialists, which is always a big part of what we do. We start off practice with specialists, working on short snapping, long snapping, kicking, all those things. And then we transition into offense, same type of format, individual, group, leading into team. Take a break with 15 players, water break, then go into special teams. So we in the middle of our practice, we would special teams, punt, return, kickoff, return, and then into defense for the remainder of practice. And then we would end practice with some type of conditioning. Wednesday, the same format. Thursday, typically most of our games are on Friday. Thursday, we covered everything, offense, defense, special teams, in a much shorter period. The other thing I'll leave is how much hitting, how much physicalness was needed. Again, with 15 players, you're concerned about maybe doing too much or too little. We know in the game of football, it's not grass basketball. You can't hit bags and run Pascal all day. So it was important that we got live work done. We would hit bags, we would teach technique, and then we would end off with some type of physical work, whether it was one-on-one drive block or some type of close quarter tackling. Same thing, a lot of open field type tackling, which was a little different than the 11-man game. I know some of the coaches have mentioned that. So we did a lot of work on that too. But that was our typical format. One of my friends, with 15 players, you can go long and hard, but you got to be careful of how you go about doing those things. So I think everybody, with the number of plays you have to consider the amount of time, the amount of reps. All of our players go both ways. At Hebron, 15 players. We have in an 8-man team probably about 11 guys that can play football. The other guys at the end of it have never played, don't understand the game. We wouldn't put them into a game. So all of our guys go both ways. Another thing that we do, one of the things we're pushing in our league with teams that are under 20 players playing 10-minute quarters as opposed to 12-minute quarters. And the last thing I'll leave, I'm going random here off the, in a game when you're playing with 15 players, I use timeouts like you do in basketball, meaning if we're on defense and we're in an extended drive, I'll call a timeout just so we can get a rest, get a water break. So some things. Conversely, offensively, if we need to slow the game down and take the air out of the basketball, we'll use the play clock. All of our quarterback will come up to the line of scrimmage, and we'll wait for the umpire to signal whether there's 10 seconds left on the play clock, just to slow it down. So just some random things. I know I'm all over the place here.
Awesome,
So,
Coach. Coach True and Coach Bob, I'm going to come up to you guys for this one. Coach True, we'll start with you. Can you talk a little bit about how you structure the preseason? Do you go double sessions during that time? How do you break that up? Just kind of go into that a little bit, Coach.
Sure. No, we do double sessions. At Monera, when I was first there, we used to actually stay the night in the gym for a couple of nights, and the thought process was I would lose less players. They wouldn't quit if I had a hold of them for a couple of days and they invested some time into it. But now we do one overnight on that first day of preseason. But for the first 2 days, those first 4 practices, we're all offense because we're just in helmets and shorts anyway. So we're trying to install at least our base plays for during those 4 practices and blocking schemes. We may get into some pass protections as well. But for those first 4 days, we're all offense. That Wednesday, those 2 practices where we transition to defense. And for those 2 practices, we're defense in the morning, defense in the afternoon. In the middle there, I always we always go over our tackling technique. We line all the kids up, and they know the drill, and we go through step by step. We fit them in. We back them up a step. We back them up 2 steps, whatever it is. So I want to document it on my practice plans that we've taught the kids how to tackle and tackle correctly before we really start to tackle. Although we never bring kids to the ground, it's always thud. And if we do, we have tackling mats that we do when we actually bring kids to the ground. But that Thursday and Friday of that first week of preseason, especially if our scrimmage is going to be Saturday. Again, we don't do any special teams that first week. That Thursday, we'll go back to offense and maybe split some defense. But I script it on my plan. I give the coaches their practice plans for offense, defense, but I'll do a sudden change. I'll call an interception or a fumble to make us jump to defense real quick for a period of time, and then we'll jump back into what we were doing. But so we'll get a little taste of back and forth and how the kids react to that sudden change and what they can expect if it was our mistake or if it was or what we're going to do if it was somebody else's mistake. And then on Friday, I'll try and do, we don't throw the ball around a ton, but that's where we really want to make sure that we've got some pass protection. We've got some, our sprint protection. We've got big on big, our yellow protection, screen game. We don't get it all in, but that's when we really start talking about how we're going to protect our quarterback when we're in either a straight drop back, a 3-step, 5-step, or if we're in a sprint, in our sprint package. So, and then obviously Saturday would be our scrimmage. And again, we just got our base stuff in, maybe a counter or two in. But for that scrimmage, we're just trying to see, we may not even know if all the kids are in the right spot yet, especially this year. We were still moving guys around. A quick story on that. My fullback, who was a pretty good kid this year, and I've got a pretty quick trigger. Our offensive line during that first week we had a guard that wasn't meeting my expectations at the time, to be nice about it. So I said, if we don't get something turned around pretty quick, you're moving the guard. And, he's a good kid. He's going to do what we wanted him to do. But we were able to, get the kid coached up a little bit better, and we left the kid where he was. But, our personnel, we're trying to still figure that out. That second week, we'll alternate offense, defense again, like some of the other coaches saying with their practice plans, on that Tuesday, because now on Tuesday morning we'll do offense, and depending on how that session went, I can call an audible and we'll go offense again in the afternoon if we need to, just to get things straight. But typically we alternate. That second week we'll start to incorporate our special teams. I call it pre-practice, is where we've got 3 long snappers, 3 punters, 3 kickoff guys, and they end up being, our varsity and our JV kicker, and then the third guy is usually a freshman or something. But this year here, we actually had a freshman was our varsity and JV kicker, so it didn't matter. But that's our pre-practice. We steal some time with our linemen on the barrels. I set up our barrels in an odd front or an even front, depending on what we may be facing. Obviously, preseason we don't know, so and sometimes it's unpredictable. So we typically would practice both against an odd and an even front with the linemen pre-practice. But that second week we alternate, and in between, like I think Coach Radowski said, in between our offensive session, if we went first. But before we transition to defense, so for offense, we'll probably do punt before we move to defense. And if we start with defense, we'll probably do punt return, because it's typically some of the same kids that are, our punt return teams usually pretty much our starting defense. And and then the Friday, that's usually the exhibition day. We have a lot of Saturday games. We don't have lights at our field, so we do a lot of Saturday games. So, I don't, our practice plans, when I make those out, I try and make them out for the week, and I adjust it accordingly, offense, defensively, so the coaches can prepare. But that doesn't mean I don't switch it around sometimes when I feel that our practice is lacking some of that juice, or lacking, or maybe we were just poor in our execution the way we should have been, where we shouldn't have been at that point. So I don't mind switching some things around. if I need to. But that's our typical work week in a nutshell. I'll finish up a little bit with what Coach was saying as far as tackling. And I think I mentioned already a little bit. But we're thud. We wrap up. I want to make sure we got them. We wrap up, but nobody goes to the ground, or if we can help it. And I think I already mentioned, but when we do bring to the ground, I've got a couple of different tackling mats that we put out, and kids hit the mat. And there's a lot of different philosophies for that, but we don't have 50. We had like 25 kids, sometimes 26, 27, but I think we had 10 freshmen or 11 freshmen that the reason why they were out is because we were 8-man, and so they knew they were going to have an opportunity to play against their peers versus throwing them out to the varsity level as a necessity. So we even though we've got 25 kids, we take it easy on them. We don't want to get anybody hurt either, and but at the same time, still teaching the best technique we can. Those tackle wheels are great, but especially we run the tackle wheels, we roll them across, and they tackle those onto the mats. But I guess that's our typical practice in a nutshell.
Awesome. Thanks, Coach. Coach Barber, how about you guys? What's preseason look like down there?
For preseason, we start way in the spring. We do spring ball, and that's when I start installing and start installing the offense, installing the defense. We go through summer. We lift weights 3 to 4 times a week. One year I was 4 days, and next year I was 3 days. And we would do a 7-on-7 or a 5-on-5 one day a week. And then as that summer went on, we got into our preseason, I guess it would be. And we get about 2.5 weeks. And the first week, what that looks like, we're still lifting weights when we get there every single day in the preseason. And then we get going. Our 2-a-days is really, it's 8 to 12, but we put a lunch break in the middle. So we're done by noon every day. And or even 11. A lot of the kids I have either work on the farm or work of some sort, so they have to get out and go work. So I have to be lenient with that. But the first week we kind of go through, we do without pads or anything. We'll go through our tackling circuit. Like you said, don't bring anybody to the ground, working on our aim points, working on different things like that, lining up, defense, offense. Then the next week, I take them about 4 or 5 days to a retreat center, take their cell phones, and then we go for about 4 days, and we have 2-a-days. We'll go morning session, then we'll have a Bible study, morning session, then some kind of community group, lunch, go back out, meet, then go practice, have dinner, and then have some kind of community, and we do that. And the kids hate it at first, but at the end of the season, they said they look back and that was one of their favorite memories. And then we get through that, and that we get back on a Thursday, and we scrimmaged on that Friday when we got back. And then we were rolling into the season the next week. But big thing for us is we lifted weights throughout the whole year, and then Thursdays we would do yoga, and then also Friday we would even do a big stretch period before the game. So that's kind of our preseason.
Awesome. Thanks, Coach. I'm going to switch gears now, fellas, to offense a little bit. Coach Shuki, I'm going to go to you first, and then Coach DeMillo. Coach Shuki, real impressed with what you guys – I hadn't seen a lot of 8-man stuff, to be honest, before these clinics, but super impressed with the way you guys kind of do your thing on that side of the ball. A lot of shifting, motion, kind of some moving parts there. Can you just talk to us a little bit about your offensive philosophy and kind of how you came into that and what you're trying to accomplish with your game plans on that side of the ball?
Yeah, sure. Well, one thing that is, I don't know if it's necessarily unique to us, but in our boarding school world, is just that we have constant turnover of kids. So I don't really know what I'm getting every year. I can't really groom a junior varsity program. So what I was looking for was really something that could be flexible, that could be power run if it needed to be. It could be, we can go to spread if we needed to, we could throw, we could run, whatever it needed to be. So, and while at the same time kind of maintaining stuff that I like to do. In our my clinic's on YouTube, and y'all can go see it. But it's what we're trying to do is really do something a little different than everybody else, so that because I know how much time it takes me to game plan, and if I'm doing something's if I have to spend extra time explaining to kids who's eligible, who's not, what this formation looks like, what this motion looks like, that's time I'm taking away from doing technique and other things during practice. So if I can do that to the team I'm playing against, that's one for me. So so we did that, and we line up unbalanced pretty much to start every play, an extra man line of scrimmage, and shift somebody off and run our stuff. And so our plays are fairly basic, I think. I mean, we're just running inside zone, kind of a counter and a sweep, and then it's just one-on-one pass game. But how we get there and how it looks and who's getting it and all that stuff that's what we're trying to accomplish. And it's not even so much to confuse the guy across from me in the sideline. It's really to confuse the kids on the field. And so our guys feel confident that they know what they're doing. And they're confusing the other side. So, if we can get that, that's good. I mean, this year I only had 15, similar to Tom at Hebron. But to be honest, like I had 10 really good athletes. Mostly hockey kids and basketball kids. And so we had some fun doing what we were doing. But I only knew about 2 or 3 of those kids coming in. The other kids kind of showed up and made us something. So, having to kind of put kids and fit them in where they were going to go. Our best running back was probably playing guard for us all year. It's because we needed him to be there. So, that's kind of the battles you face. But in terms of how we practice that, we do individual, but we kind of do it's odd. We do individual as a team. Pretty much everyone does offensive line individual except for our quarterback. Everyone learned every single blocking scheme because we never knew. If 2 kids go down, our starting wide receiver may be playing center. So, that kind of stuff was easily possible for us. So every kid except the quarterback basically did offensive line individual, and he was handing the ball off during that time, so he knew what was going on. And same thing, every kid pretty much did defensive end in practice at some point. So we did individual work, but we did it as a team for the most part. And I found this year that our practice plans, offensively, defensively, were almost entirely team oriented. We broke up into skill line a little bit, but not for more than like 15 minutes. So.
Awesome, Coach. Coach DeMillo, going to come down to you next. You guys had a really good quarterback this year, a kid who could really run around and do some things. Just talk a little bit about, your kind of offensive style and how you featured that guy. You also had a pretty good wideout too, I think. So, you guys are pretty good at mixing it up. Just talk a little bit about what you look like on offense and kind of how you featured that athlete at quarterback.
Yeah, in 8-man football, it's tough because you've got 8 men on the field, and my priority to begin with was to make sure that we had an athlete behind the center, somebody who could take off and run when I needed him to, and somebody who could also throw. Garrett, prior to this season, was a pure on slot back for us, a running back. He used to play one of the slot backs in Pokey's offense. Everyone who knows Pokey knows he runs a lot of inside veer, outside veer, a lot of spread. So he was kind of used to that. So getting him to change into a QB was a little difficult. Definitely doing the shootouts over the summer helped him a lot. But basically my game plan with the offense was to be as complex as I could with the formations to try to confuse defenses, spread them out. It's basically what I tried to do against my opponents was to spread them across the field. I ran a ton of empty. And just kind of let Garrett do what he wanted to do with the ball. And that mostly worked. I started off the season trying to run some veer. I got away from that. I had 2 big tackles that weren't exactly agile. They were more kind of stationary units. So we kind of switched to a more power style run football. I actually stole the offense from OOB there. And we ran a lot of that. It was offensively, my game plan was just to continually not try to confuse my own players, but continually try to confuse the defenses. So I had trips right, I had bunch right formations, I had empty formations, I had base formations, I had 2 tight end sets. I ran almost every formation you could think of in 8-man to try to confuse defenses on just what we were running next. A lot of it hinged on Garrett I think if I could move forward and kind of change a few things, it's to not make him the total workhorse. But he was willing to take it this year, and I mean, he obviously did well with it. Next year, the offense is obviously going to be different. I just don't have that workhorse behind center anymore. So, I mean, I did whatever I could do to basically throw defenses off balance.
Awesome. Coach Gallant, going to slide over to you for a minute. You guys are kind of seem like more of a power run oriented type of attack. Just talk about kind of how you guys line up and what you're trying to do when you attack defenses.
You're muted, John.
Coach.
I forgot I had to beg my wife to take my dog out. Sorry. We got our offense from Coach Steinbrock. He gave a great presentation here a few weeks ago. So that's our base offense. So it's definitely a power running offense. We went to this for two reasons. When I was researching and we were doing a lot of work for the previous year coming into this, I reached out to a lot of coaches, and Coach Steinbrock is one of the few that got back to me. And when I spoke to him on the phone, his comment that stuck to me, and I think he said it in his presentation, that there's nothing more demoralizing as a coach than knowing what the other team's going to do and not being able to stop it. And so, our base offense is pretty simple. We're putting as many guys to the point of attack as possible. We have at least our two up backs. So it's kind of like single wing principles almost. We have two up backs who are in the A gaps, about a yard off behind the lineman. And then our quarterback / running back is at 4 yards, 5 yards, right behind the center, direct snap. We're double teaming. Coach Steinbrock, we've kind of morphed a little bit. He does a lot of single blocking and that stuff. I try to get as many down blocks and double teams as possible. We'll put both up backs on the same side. So our whole approach, when we did this, we wanted to develop an attitude with our kids. We didn't really have a strong sense of attacking offensively, aggressiveness when we were doing our spread stuff and our zone blocking stuff. Kids just weren't attacking. So we felt we had a kid who was going to be a tailback that would be really good just running downhill, not so much running zone and being patient and finding a hole and cutting. So we felt this would fit our personnel really well. But at the same time, we have the ability to spread out with some formations and run shotgun and some traditional spread stuff offensively. A kid who can throw it somewhat good, decently. We have a kid that played for the first time ever as a junior that was a pretty darn good receiver. His yards per catch and touchdown percentage and stuff like that was pretty amazing for a first-time player. So, and for us game planning wise, I want to find bubbles in the offense, and I'm going to double team on the line, and I'm going to lead two guys through if possible. Depending on what front we get, I'll even pull my backside guard and have three guys going through the hole. Getting as many guys as possible. And it's simple. I think we have 15 different run plays that we practice, but probably the same 2 or 3 blocking schemes for the most part, at least at the point of attack. When we run our counters and stuff, it's a little different. But then, we want to throw different spread formations out there just to make the other team prepare. Because if you see an empty set, you're going to spend time in practice planning for that when that's not really our priority. We'll have it if we can use it and get an advantage out of it, we can go to it. But I want to make the other team prepare for as many different things as possible so they don't have time to really spend on what I want to do, which is run the ball out of our base formation.
Created a lot of big plays through the air for us, actually, because people were selling out on the run and forced them into man-to-man, and good receiver, and the quarterback had some pretty lofty stats too. So,
yep.
Coach Barr, we're going to slide over to you for an offensive question as well. You guys had a pretty good pass on attack from what I saw on film there. Maybe what are one or two schemes that you really like the most, and what's kind of the best way in 8-man to get your best receiver the ball?
Our biggest play, and anybody that played us can tell you, the tunnel screen was our. You knew it was coming at some point during the game. There were several times we scored 3-4 touchdowns on it during a single game, and that's running it out of 2x2 or 3x1 or tight end with the open receivers, and that was probably our best play. I also like mesh and 8-man. If you can get it, if you can have your offensive lineman have the time, just meshing 2 receivers across the middle it's very. My defensive coordinator said it was impossible, and he knew it was coming, and they still couldn't get it because we worked on the meshing, getting shoulder to shoulder coming across. I always said my Y was on the top, and they always knew whoever was meshing, Y's on the top, or X was on the bottom. But so I would say mesh, and also a flood pattern of some sort was a great play for us. And they see us coming out, and we have that immediate or intermediate route. We have a short route, and they have the deep. And a lot of the times, the deep one would come open. But that was probably our 3 best. And then our 2-point play, I talked about it. Talked about this and having a 2-point package, having 5 or 6 plays, and we would run our Falcon slant combination. And just instead of running a slant, we call it Z twirl and get out. And it was, every time we threw it, it was open, whether the quarterback got it there, but 80% of the time he got it there. It was an easy place. But those are about our 3 or 4 plays that I would say put in no matter what system you're in. Because our varsity was about 70% run this year, and we still had those. Our JV was about 80% pass because we didn't have the big guys up top. So we threw it around the field. So it just depends on what you have, but I would say tunnel screen number 1, mesh number 2, and then have a flood pattern number 3.
Awesome, Coach. Thanks. Dean, I'm going to come down to you for a second. It seems like, and this can kind of be both sides of the ball, and then Coach True and Radulski, I'm going to come to you guys for a couple of defense questions. But Coach Plant, before we do that, it seems like there's really not a lot of extra point kicking in 8-man because you really can't protect the kickers is what I'm hearing. So it seems like 2-point conversions, which Coach mentioned, are a huge part of the game. As a head coach, what are you doing during the week, and what kind of philosophy are you using both offensively and defensively in those 2-point situations?
Yeah, we actually had a pretty good kicker, so we our big creative brain thrust decided to move the holder back about 2 yards, and it gave us time. We actually had a transfer student that could kick, so we actually kicked probably about, I'd say 30%, 40% of the time. But yeah, we like most people, you have those 2 or 3 go-to plays that you like on the 2-point, but defensively, we didn't have a kick block in. We assumed most were going for 2, and by season's end, I think you had a pretty good pulse on what teams wanted to do things. Funny story: we were at Socopee and we were pretty beat up, and they were playing well. They had a bit of it was a good play. It was an unbalanced look, and the backside tight end was legal. And I actually convinced the officiating crew that it was an illegal formation, and they took the 2 points off the board. I still owe Socopee 2 points. I kind of felt bad after, but yeah, it's we look at it as it's fourth and 2.5 from the goal to go. So not a lot of teams kick.
Coach Shuki, offensively, you guys had, I think, going back to your clinic, you had a couple of things that you like to do down there on 2-point conversions. What was kind of your favorite thing down there?
Sorry, I muted myself.
There you go.
I kind of game plan 2-point conversions for that team. Again, we went into the game about 3 or 4 2-point conversion plays because we we had a kick. My kicker from the year before, and best team we've had here in 20 years, 11 man, was back. But he also was a starting corner. I wasn't going to risk him planting his leg and getting taken out. So we were going to go for 2 overtime. And so, we did a couple of things, like, usually out of a package of plays that we ran during the game, where we had one of those plays would be a 2-point play, and, quick play action screen stuff, quick play action bubble screen. We had one player we thought just, we get up by a score, I think we're going to leave this tight end uncovered if we go unbalanced the other way. And exactly what happened. And twice in the same game, we had kid, the ball was probably in the air for 10 seconds. It was just our quarterback just rolled out and threw a lollipop back the other way twice for 2 points. So, we kind of game planned for those particular defenses and what they did down there. And, so that was pretty much it.
Awesome. Coach True, going to come up to you. The guys have said defense is a little bit of a struggle. So tell me what Mount Ararat looks like on defense. What do you guys employ for a scheme, and what are you trying to accomplish with it?
Yeah, thanks, Mike. This year we actually just went with 2 down linemen and 2 what we called outside linebackers that were / defensive end types, so that we could get we were in a 4-man front. And I don't want to call it even, because we pretty much play head up, unless situation dictates we jump in the gaps and do different things that way. But for the most part, we had 2 down linemen and 2 outside linebackers. One of them was an adjuster, so like when Coach said he comes out in the spread, we would adjust with one of those outside backers. He would cover the number 2 to either side. And depending on, for us, we had one outside backer that could cover better than the other. So we would flip him. If it was a 2-by-1 set, we would flip that cover linebacker, if you will, to the number 2. And then we ran with, at the beginning, we started off with 1 linebacker in the middle with a safety over the top, but linebacker with heels at 4.5 or something like that, and our safety was at 8. So it wasn't like he was deep by any means, but we quickly learned that running a safety wasn't good for 1, our scheme, or 2, our personnel. So we actually moved him into the box. So we had a 4 front, because we saw a lot of 4 down linemen with everybody was together. So we condensed our defense that way, which was good. We could expand if we needed to. When everybody went empty, we had guys that lined up the way they were supposed to. Coverage wise, we got in trouble a lot. I know Coach DeMillo was talking. You said he had 2 good receivers that could run and catch, and it was tough. We ended up running a lot of man because, as Coach said, the guys were just trying to formation us out of the box. So we were trying to make sure that we could cover the run. You get real thin in a hurry when everybody's spread out and you only have 3 linemen. I'd move our linebacker up, and so we could go with a 3-man front against their 3-man once they get once they're empty or a 2-by-2 look. But you get real thin quick without enough guys in the box. So we tried to play some man so that we could move in anyway. Sometimes with some success, sometimes without. But that's basically how we looked. Like I said, we morphed out of for like a cover 3 shell more to we called it a cover 2 invert. We could play cover 2, but with the corners, and we would void the flat or buzz the flats with the outside backers. But they were late getting there. Anytime you got a guy that has to have 2 responsibilities, such as those outside linebackers, he gets in conflict pretty quick. And guys were, good at trying to scheme us into that conflict. That's pretty much our defense in a nutshell.
Coach Podolsky, how about you? And I know you it seemed like in your progression of learning what you wanted to do on defense, you kind of stumbled upon some things coverage-wise that you realized along that path. Talk about your base defense structure, and then specifically about what you're doing with coverages.
A couple things. Just an observation in our league. and watching a lot of tape of what different people do. So a couple of concepts that I see on tape, and I'm going to get back to what we run at Hebron. What I call a cover zero concept, meaning a 4-man line, a 4-2, 4-4 type concept with no safety in the middle of the field. A little bit what Coach True was maybe talking about. Man all the way across the board, a 4-man line, 2 linebackers, your adjuster, however you want to adjust the spread and all those type of things. There's 2 layers to that defense. Your frontage and the people that are playing man-to-man all the way across the board. Very strong against the run. And like any defense, it has strengths and weaknesses. The weaknesses, obviously, if you pop it, whether it's a run that penetrates through it or whatever, you don't have that last layer of defense. So you're susceptible to long plays. Within that cover zero scheme, we see a lot of 3-3. If you're an odd front, you're playing with a nose and 2 ends, and you're going to play that cover zero concept, you may see a 3-3 type of deal. What we do at Hebron, I'm an old school guy. I like to maintain layers of the defense, a frontage, a linebacker level, and I'll play with the safety in the middle of the field. Unusual situations, I'll be short yardage, goal line, we'll bring the safety up to play a linebacker position. One thing we do with that safety is he's a robber type guy. We'll play him in that 6 to 7 yard area, and he'll key through the lineman to the backs, much like a middle linebacker. And if we get a heavy run field, he's going to fill the alley. If we get a high set, he'll drop back and become a middle third or post player. We evolved to a 3-man line for the most part, and I'll talk about our nickel situation. So we're playing a nose, 2 ends, a free safety, and then our linebackers will adjust somewhat, that Coach True talked about, to power sets, to eye, to spread, and those type of sets. One of the things that we evolved to is our nose would bubble off. So if we got an empty set out of an odd front, we would bubble the nose off to a flex position. We can do a number of things with that. We know quarterback scramble and quarterback run is a big part of the explosiveness of 8-man football. So if we got a quarterback that's a run threat that extend plays, that bubble guy could be a spy to help you out in those things. Within that bubble, we could tie in a number of line moves. We could pinch the 2 ends in, loop them around, do a number of different things. And it turned out to be a really nice package for us. The last thing, and again, that's nice against the spread and all those type of things, to be able to stop the power run, quite a bit of line moves. We didn't have a big line, obviously. Our kids are like 160, 170 pounds. So we're always on the move in some fashion or another. We're either slanting, gapping, looping. We don't do a lot of blitzing for the most part. Line moves were a big part of what we're doing to, to attempt to stop the power run game. Coverage-wise, I'm going to back up. We're basically a man safety free type of concept, meaning our corners are going to be man-to-man. Our linebackers will adjust to, whether it's a spread set, to go out and cover a detached slot receiver from that standpoint. So that was the easiest way for us to cover and maintain those 3 layers of the defense. The last concept, if it's a 3rd and long in a long yardage situation, we would play cover 3. We're going to play 3 deep. Our safety is going to play back as a middle thirds player. corners playing traditional thirds. In this concept, now 2 linemen are now going to be contained rushers, and we're going to be 3 underneath. Our outside backers are going to be wall, curl to flat players, and our middle linebacker will be a middle hook type of player. And with those 2 linemen, we do some different things. If your quarterback's not a run threat, we're going to pinch him in, twist him to get the quarterback to move off the spot. So that's what we do defensively.
Awesome, Coach. I'm going to slide one more question in here, and then I want to open it up because I know there's some guys out there that probably have some specific questions that they want to answer. So, Coach Shuki, I'm going to ask you because you mentioned you had a pretty good kicker. What are you trying to do with kickoff? What's that look like?
We play, I think, in the windiest spot in the state of Maine.
It is windy there.
So that
I
changes.
agree.
Our kid was great. He's unfortunately he's graduating. He could put the ball on a number. Basically he could put it on the number 10 on a kickoff. We say, all right, Justin, I want the ball on the 15. He could kind of do that. So we mix it. We only kicked deep when we were up by a lot. We onside or pooched every kickoff this year. Any kid that could put the ball close to the end zone every time, but I wasn't really sure. My best kids run kickoff because my kids that aren't any good can't really play. So a lot of my stars run kickoff anyway. But I didn't want us to break a big play and go up kickoff return. So I think we recovered 5 or 6 kickoffs this year in 7 games, 6 games, including 3 in one game, different ways, 2, 1 onside, 1 pooch, and 1 forced fumble. We told the kid to put the ball different places, and he could do it, and he worked on it too. We pre-practice, put the hoop, the big hoops out there, and he'd try to drop it in different places. Trying different things to do the onside. We actually had 2 kickers. I had a South African exchange student who was a rugby player, but not a good one. He was about his legs were the size of a little twig. He was a little guy, but he could kick. And we lined the 2 up next to each other, and occasionally he would go out in front and onside the other way because one was left-footed, one was right-footed. So that's a unique situation. But if you have a kid that's lefty that can kick, put him as your number, whatever you want to call it, we call it number 4 in the middle next to your kicker, and have them, just kind of dick around them a little bit that way. That was fun too. We almost got holding us on that one. Some ball got stuck in the kid's in his hands, luckily for him. So
I know there's not many 11-man guys on here, so I'll say and Coach Capone saw it the other night too. Coach Wells had a kickoff scheme where he had 3 kickers in the middle, one who could kind of toe kick straight ahead, a lefty on one side, a righty on the other side, then clustered the other 4 guys up on the hash marks, which I thought was I hadn't seen it, but I kind of like the concept. We might mess around with that a little bit. Coach DeMillo, tell me a little bit about punt game. What's that look like? I know that you probably never want to punt because Coach Bonavy's on punt guy, which I love in my defensive coordinator. But if you do have to punt, how does that look?
To give you an idea of how much I'm a Bonavy product, I had 3 different fake punt sets. I hated punting. We ended up having we had a really streaky kicker. He could either kick it to the back of the end zone or punt to 60 yards, or he would shim it off his shoe right out of bounds. But our punt set was a very basic box set. We put everyone right in the box. We went against a couple spread sets early, and I found out that it's very easy to blitz that set and punt and block the punt, which I initially saw some video on. So we stacked everyone in the box, and our two basically wings just fanned out real quick on the punt after initially blocking. But punt was – special teams are such a concern. I hate to give this away because it really worked for us. But in kickoff and punt return, we actually told our 2 end guys who are supposed to obviously contain to hang back, and we create almost a V to force the people to the out of bounds markers. And when we started to do that, to tell our 2 contain guys to kind of hang back and try to force them out, it actually started to work for us really well. We actually stopped teams from returning kickoffs and punt returns, which the other guys can all agree, which was one of the hardest things to do, was cover the field during kickoff and punt. And that actually really worked for us. And so as far as punt and covering the punt, our wings kind of stood back. Our middle guys flushed into the sidelines, and we just kind of pushed them out from there.
That was great, fellas. I really appreciate your time. I'm going to let the other guys come on and let them get some questions in, because I know that there's a couple guys who are transitioning over, and I know BL just has questions about everything. And you guys have kept him so he's got no pillow either, so he's right on this. So I'm going to let these guys go ahead and get some questions on you guys in here. BL, I'm going to start with you, man.
I'm just listening and paying attention, but what's the, I mean, maybe you touched upon it, I was in and out a little bit. What's the cultural feeling in your school as far as like kids, you know, like feeling like, you know, this is exciting, a new opportunity, or there's some kids that struggle with the transition?
Dean, you want to talk about that one?
Sure. Well, we looked at that as probably one of the major pieces to transitioning was just we have a pretty long-standing tradition in Old Orchard of football. It's always been kind of the primary fall sport. We've never had boys soccer. It's always been. So we didn't want it to look like it was a downgrade in football. So we went all in, and it really comes down to your players. And as much as we could champion it and promote it, once they're all in, if you have a football culture already established to some degree, it really just took right off. It was really smooth transition for our student body, and certainly the student athlete. So we were fortunate, I think, where we didn't spend a lot of time with the naysayers and focused on the positives and got kids involved in interviews and questions. You know, we put them in front and center really well. So no, and you know, once people saw the product, I think they were like, yeah, it's football. And but the kids were great, and the culture and we had a fantastic fall vibe last year.
Dan,
Coach Hathaway, I have a question.
Well, how about parents? Just to kind of, any parents kind of struggle with that transition too?
Parents are always wonderful, and they're probably the best part of coaching. They were actually very supportive. The football parents were. You know, we had a few alumni, kind of old schoolers that, and I've been around Old Orchard for a long time, and my assistants have too. So, you know, we kind of pissed on the fires on the side, and we were out in front of it. You know, we were at all the youth clinics, we were at all the youth games, you know, and we did try to brand it. You know, like when we played the day before the regular season opened, we brought in. I hit up a bunch of alumni on Facebook and got them involved, and with a tailgate and stuff like that. So, yeah, parents, you know, you have your core group of, no matter what you do, those 10% of parents are going to bitch, complain, and suck in general. So you deal with it, and you promote the 90 and hand out T-shirts and tell them how awesome their kids are.
Awesome, thanks.
To be
Can I
clear,
get-
pretty much
Yes,
the-
I got a question on punt game.
Yeah.
Does anybody have a punt formation, a punt scheme that they thought was sound and successful for them? Anybody? I'm open to anybody.
Coach Barber?
If you're a spread guy, I would recommend quick kick because it kept the defenses off a lot, and that's what we did. But when it got to those deep situations, we'd go with a tight end and a wing on one side, and then a gunner on the other, and then have a personal protector and then the punter. And when we did punt, my JV didn't punt at all, and my varsity only punted 3 times. But when we did have to punt, it worked really well.
Okay. Did you rugby it or just straight ahead? Was it a rugby style or straight ahead?
We did both, and if it was rugby, what we would do is all the linemen would almost like we were like our flood play. We're moving the whole entire line of scrimmage with the backside hinging, and we could rugby that style, and we did that at the end of the year. But we could do it either way, depending on what the punter was felt more comfortable with.
Okay.
Coach
Coach,
Turkey, how
we
about
had
you guys? What'd you do with Kent Hill?
I'd always been a spread punt guy, but I went back to traditional when we do guard, guard wing, personal protector, tight punt, and my punter was my best player. He was our wide receiver, starting corner. He won us a game, our first game of the year. He put 2 inside the 5-yard line in the last 6 minutes of the game. We won by a score. So, but I mean, the scheme wasn't anything. We just took 3 kick slides and held on for dear life, and we got good snap, good kick. So it wasn't like we were really doing anything groundbreaking. You can ask Tom Brodalski, his quarterback quick kicked on 3rd and 12 from his own 1. He probably won the game against us doing that. Totally took us by surprise. That was his own decision too, right, Coach?
It was player decision.
Coach Wolfgram,
Yeah.
we similar to those guys, we were more of a tight punt, but sometimes we would go unbalanced either way, which way we were kicking. It was more of a rugby style. We didn't punt a whole heck of a lot, but we would go unbalanced a lot to protect that edge, if you will. And then rugby, we had a freshman punter, so we wanted to protect him as much as we could to get the ball off. But that seemed to work best for us. I mean, we tried the traditional. It worked better for us when we were balanced. When we were really, that was part of our scout. When we were really breaking down teams, we were looking at how they were lining up to a punt formation and how they were attacking it. So we could develop a scheme to be able to protect our punter or actually give us an advantage if we could with a rugby style or if some teams didn't even rush, so then we could go more traditional with a regular punt. But it was all based on our scout of what our opponent was going to do.
Okay.
Let me go back real quick. I the thing about it, because I was doing the math in my head, we didn't have personal protector. There's only 8 guys, even number of guys. So we tried at the beginning of the year doing unbalanced with a personal protector, but I didn't like it. So we balanced up guard, tackle, wing, and just kick slide. And we had good snapper, so we could put our punter back about 13 yards and really get it back there. And the kick could get it back there. So
who took A gaps for you, Steve? Who blocked A gaps?
So our kick slides were all inside. So our guards basically try to kick behind the long snapper, and almost like PAT block where you step inside.
Yeah.
They kick to the inside, and if someone want to go around the outside on us, good luck. I mean,
And you can
the angle was
tangle
there
away.
because we were so deep, but our kids got the ball off good enough.
Okay.
Let me mention this as a sideline, John, Coach Rudelsky here. And Steve Shuki may know this. We played Pomfret in our championship game, 8-man. They never punted. We broke down, I think we had a couple of tapes prior to playing them. In no situation, even coming out, did they punt. Maybe it's the statistics or the sabermetrics, their philosophy. It was an interesting philosophy, but I don't know how you feel, Steve, and Steve played him early in the year. I think it was your first game, but no punt. They always went for it, regardless.
Yeah, I don't think they punted against us either. I thought about that in the summertime. I just couldn't bring myself to not. I didn't have the balls to do it. I couldn't. I know that people do it. I couldn't. 4th and 10 in my own 10, I can't go for it. So
they went for it. So
yeah, and I had a good punter too. If I had a bad punter, it's easier decision to make. But I had a kid that actually could get the ball off, and also was a fake threat because he was best athlete on the field. So, and I know it's been done other places. I just can't do it.
Let me go to Coach Solomon. What do you got, Coach?
I just got a question for the MPA guys that went 8-man last year. I've been here for 4 years, and in the last 3 years, we've played 3 JV games total. So that's one of the big reasons why we wanted to go 8-man to help develop our younger kids. We're looking at the 9 seniors that we're going to have. 5 of them have only played in 3 JV games. So they're going into the senior year with no experience. Did you guys find the transition to 8-man allowed you guys to get some JV games in with each other for your kids?
Dean, you want to take that one? And then Frank?
Yeah, I think in theory that was part of it. In practice, or the way it worked out, games we had scheduled, either injuries on our side or injuries on another, prevented it. But with the vast amount of teams that, we also didn't have a lot to choose from. We weren't going to go to Ellsworth on a Monday afternoon to try to get a JV game in. So this year, I think the opportunity is outstanding to get at least 4 to 5 JV games in. Just regionally, it makes sense, and obviously you have way more teams to pick from. So if we're smart about it, do 3 ways if necessary. And I know there's some 11-man schools out there talking about possibly scheduling some 8-man JV scrimmages. So, I think everybody's open-minded and optimistic that that's the case now. Last year, I think, and Frank can speak to it, I think he had a pretty good schedule going in.
Frank?
Yeah, we did. Thanks, Dean. And like Dean said, that's how I was selling our moving to 8-man to the parents and to the players, that they were able to play against their peers. So we really fought hard at getting those sub-varsity games, and we played a team, I think, a couple of times, if not 3 times, just so they get those freshmen, sophomore, some of those kids that never played before, and we had a pile of them, especially those freshmen, so they get that payoff at the end of the week, or they can, something for them to look forward to, because at Monterey, that's how we used to lose. We'd have a big freshman class, we'd get 3/4 of them back for sophomore, and by the time they got to junior, they were dwindled away, and senior year we'd end up with 2 or 3 seniors every year, because by the time they got there, they never had that payoff, or they were getting their crap kicked out of them at the varsity level when they didn't belong out there. So I'm all for the JV level. I'm hoping that I'm going to talk to Coach Cooper across the bridge at Brunswick, and maybe get some, because we talked last year's clinic about doing a JV. I'd love the idea of doing three ways. Because, at the end of the day, my philosophy is it's about getting playing time for the kids and getting their skill level up. We don't keep score. I don't really talk about our score as far as our JV level. It's all about development in our kids. So I love the concept of the 3-way, because then you can, even if you're getting whacked around a little bit, you really didn't lose because you're done at halftime and you're playing somebody else. So that I hope that these teams that come in the league, we get more of a chance. Absolutely.
Coach Collins, I'll give you the last question, and then I'll let Coach Capone close us down.
Well, my biggest thing is I'm taking over a program that kind of